the agenda with me tonight, I have Joe and Glenn and Chris and Jill. And on Google Meet, I have Rannigan and Nick and Mike, Mark and Doug. So welcome, everyone. We're going to tonight start Shohaku's book on living by vow. But before I do that, there was a little bit of unfinished business from last Saturday when Joe asked about the three turnings of the wheel. And I remembered that what I did remember was that these were the teachings, these are separate teachings of the Buddha. What I didn't remember was exactly what they were. So, what I have here now, just to tell you, the first turning of the wheel was at Deer Park, Sarnath, and was the Four Noble Truths. I think actually we didn't say this, but this is a Mahayana framework actually that this comes from. The second turning of the wheel is the Perfection of Wisdom teachings, which he gave at Vulture Park later on. And then the third turning of the wheel, which this refers to as good differentiation, is when the teachings of Buddha nature. So those are the three turnings of the Dharma wheel, as they are classically thought about. So to go back to Shohaku, any questions about that before I? Okay. Let's talk about Shohaku and about vow. He tells us, first of all, that a bodhisattva is one who lives by vow rather than by karma, and defines karma as habits, preferences, or a ready-made system of values. The vow is like a magnet or a compass that shows us or moves us in the direction of the Buddha. Shohaku's first chapter takes up the four bodhisattva vows, which he then ties directly to the Four Noble Truths. He talks about the difference between how Buddhism sees the meaning of vow. As we know, we think of vow as a solemn promise. But vow, and especially this takes on apparently some Japanese cultural things as well, has a much larger and more complex meaning in Japanese than it does in English. We've touched on that before, so I'm not going to go into that a whole lot. But the first thing that Shohaku does is he presents an old version of the Bodhisattva vows that help us to see more clearly the connection between the Four Noble Truths and the four Bodhisattva vows. The first Noble Truth, of course, is life as dukkha. The first vow, as it was in the old iteration, I vow to enable people to be released from the truth of suffering. Suffering here, dukkha, refers not just to pain and sadness brought on by the circumstances of our lives, but to the deeper meaning of dukkha. Because everything is impermanent and constantly changing, and because there is no abiding self, there is nothing substantial to grasp. We suffer because we can't control or possess anything. He then describes the four kleshas The Yogacara school's four fundamental delusive ideas that defile our mind and our life. The first is ignorance of the Dharma. The second, egocentric views based on ignorance. The third is arrogance, and the fourth, self-attachment. This connects to the second vow. I vow to enable people to understand the truth of the origin of suffering. The third older vow is I vow to enable people to peacefully settle down in the truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Here, Shohaku points out that the third vow actually connects with the fourth noble truth, and the fourth vow to the third. The third vow actually has to do with the fourth noble truth. The vow is to study and to settle into a way of practice. The path referred to is, of course, the Eightfold Path. The fourth vow, the fourth older vow, is I vow to enable people to attain nirvana. Shohaku says here that this is actually connected to the third noble truth, referring to Buddha's enlightenment. What he does then is to differentiate between the old and the new idea of bodhisattva. The older vows assumed that the bodhisattva as one who is already enlightened and already in nirvana. The newer version of the vows represent a person who still has inexhaustible delusions and desires, still must study and learn, and still has not attained the way. If you use the way that we say the vows, that's much more common. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Doesn't mean I'm anything special. I'm one of them. Delusions, same thing. So we are looking, as we look at it now, while it doesn't say this in the text, my assumption is that that change came about with Dogen, or with those beliefs and with the system of practice enlightenment. I mean, at this point, we now see bodhicitta as the beginning of the path. We are ordinary human beings, but if we take the vows, we are bodhisattvas. We have to study the teachings and practice endlessly, moment by moment, day by day, to attain Buddha's enlightenment. We vow to do things that are impossible. He makes an interesting point from this. He says that this means that our practice is endless. We can never completely fulfill the four vows. So we must practice them without end. We are aiming at something eternal, absolute, and infinite. No matter how hard we study, practice, or help other people, there is no end to it all. When we compare our achievement to something infinite, absolute, and eternal, it is virtually nothing. He says that we should never compare our practice to others. When we compete, it is built on egocentricity and no matter how hard or long we practice, if our practice is based on ego, we are totally deluded, leading to selfishness, arrogance, and self-attachment. when we understand that our goal is absolute, infinite, and eternal, no matter how hard we practice, how deep our understanding, or what we master, compared to the infinite, our efforts are minuscule. We have nothing to be arrogant about. For the same reason, if we cannot practice as hard, sit as long, or understand as deeply as others, we don't need to feel guilty or inferior. We should not feel proud of our practice or feel humble about our lack of practice or understanding. We are just as we are. We take one more step toward the infinite, the absolute, moment by moment, one step at a time. When we sit, there is no comparison. We are right here, right now, with this body and mind, awakening to reality. This is the complete manifestation of absolute, infinite, eternal enlightenment. All of our day-to-day activities should be based on the Four Noble Truths and the four Bodhisattva vows, which are the basic teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. Let me stop there for a second and just ask if there are any questions or comments. Randigan.
I have one question about the statement that if you take the vow, then you become a bodhisattva. Because I remember reading later on in this same book that he makes the statement that we're all bodhisattvas. Or maybe he said we're all potential bodhisattvas. But I came away from that thinking everyone in the world is a bodhisattva. And I'd like you to just elaborate on that a little bit.
My understanding of that is just exactly the word that you put in there. Everyone is a potential bodhisattva.
Okay. Thank you.
But I think we can't be a bodhisattva unless we take the vow. We're living in delusion otherwise.
But then that excludes people in other religions that don't take that vow.
If you take the vow literally, what I would say about that, if you mean the literal vow, I agree with you. I don't think it means that. And I would use as an example, he talks in this, I didn't talk about this, but he talks about living with his family in a house within a convent, and talks about the nuns, and there was some very close ties there in terms of they're talking about emptiness versus God. Now, he drew more of a difference than I heard in what the nun said about that. But I think, the vow is really to see beyond this, I guess I would say to you, in one way, I would say to you, I experienced bodhicitta long before I knew what Buddhism was, by that definition.
Okay.
Yeah, for a long time. And I think a lot of people, as Shohaku repeats regularly in this chapter, feel there's something more. They feel unsatisfied and they start looking for that. When I was first on that path, one of the Orthodox people that I talked to said to me, he said, "Oh, you're a seeker." and he referred to me as a seeker because I was looking for something more. I didn't know what it was yet. But that would be my answer to that. I think we don't take anything else literally in Zen, so I don't know why we would take that literally either. Okay. Anything else or any more to that? Just go ahead.
I would just add that the beings in the universe, right, whether they're Christian or Jewish or Hindu or whatever religious denomination, they all possess Buddha nature, bodhicitta, right? But even if they're practicing, say, Christianity, they're still subject to suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So, but someone who takes the bodhisattva vows makes a concerted effort to liberate all beings, regardless of whether they're in a different denomination, with the knowledge that all beings, are suffering, and suffering has a cause, and there's a solution to that cause. But not everyone takes those steps, right, to practice and to take the vows. So I would say that not everyone would be a bodhisattva. To be a bodhisattva, you have to specifically take the vows, but that every being has Buddha nature. So right. that's where for me, the difference
that's exactly what it's saying. I will add one thing to this, and that is, if you read about mysticism, most mystics are similar no matter what religion. If whether you're talking about Christianity, whether you're talking about Buddhism, if you're looking at the Sufis who are mystics within Islam or in Hindu, what I've read, and I've not done a deep dive into this, but what I've read is it's all pretty much the same, and it is all an understanding that we're all connected, we're all one. It shares that with Buddhism. So if that fits into that equation somewhere, I think it does, but a lot of it probably depends on motivation, because that's what determines karma. So, Chris.
I have a pretty simplified take on this, which is that anyone who is acting compassionately and selflessly towards another human being in order to reduce their suffering is a bodhisattva in that moment. And oftentimes when we're watching television, we see someone who's doing something altruistic, and we say, oh, this person's a bodhisattva, and it doesn't matter if they're a Buddhist or a Catholic or whatever they are. And because our practice is based on action, and it's also based on intention, and both of those things are present whenever a person is acting compassionately. So I would say they're all bodhisattvas at that point, in that moment.
Yeah, I think I would add to that what we read about Zen being orthopraxy. This is primarily a practice. We have beliefs, but it is primarily a practice. And from that standpoint, we can look at, and I'd be curious what people think about people like Mother Teresa or Desmond Tutu, or those people who literally, Martin Luther King for that matter, who literally spent their lives for the benefit of others. I think from a practical standpoint, that is the vow. If you're doing it, whether you're saying it or not, doesn't matter. And if you're saying it and you ain't doing it, it doesn't matter either. So,
Buddhists don't have the corner on the compassion market.
no,
So,
not at all. Not at all. Anything else? Joe, go ahead.
Bit of a sidebar. In later chapters, we'll see that we start talking about how the lineage comes about, but they start around, Shohaku starts around 600 or 700 AD and starts progressing from there and talks about that. But I'm curious about what happened prior to that. How did Buddhism start and move across China? Was it coming from Tibet, Nepal? Was it coming directly from India? Was it blending together and moving across, and then one day then Chan came out of all of that? But what were the real roots? How did it flow?
I think we need a book report on that.
I'll recommend it to somebody.
I don't, Nick.
I did just finish the audiobook version of Dr. I believe it's Dr. Lopez's most recent book, which is a massive undertaking. It was 30 chapters. Each one is a 5,000 word essay on the history of Buddhism, and he covers kind of in what order it came to each country. And he covers a lot of it's an incredible book. It's not easy to get through, and he covers a lot of stuff that's hard to hear too, from just the darker side of the history and stuff there. But it's absolutely worthwhile. So if you're curious about, I can't remember now because that chapter was months ago. It took me a long time to get through it. But he did have a chapter where he specifically talked about sort of in what order it traveled to each country. But I think there was a pretty direct transmission there from India to China, and a lot of monks who were traveling from China back to India to get texts and statues and things like that. So, but at what point specifically Chan came about, I'm blanking, because I know the Bodhidharma is kind of a semi-legendary figure, but definitely has a lot to do with Buddhism encountering Chinese culture, encountering Taoism, Confucianism, and kind of being in dialogue with those things, philosophically speaking. So.
Again, say the author and the name of the book for folks.
It's Lopez, David. Is it David S? Let me look it up real quick. I believe it's David S. Lopez. Let me get it right though. Donald S. Lopez Jr. He's a really accomplished scholar. He's written a lot on, up to this point, on like Tibetan Buddhism. He wrote a book called Prisoners of Shangri-La. So, but this is like his kind of his magnum opus, I think. He just released recently, trying to kind of do his best to piece together a world history. So it's.
And what's the name of the book? What's the title of the book?
I believe it's called, let me find it here. Buddhism, A Journey Through History by Donald S. Lopez.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
That's very helpful. Anything else before we move on? Okay. We are taught to awaken to the reality of our lives and to live on the basis of that reality. We have to live right here, right now, with this body and mind in the company of others. We are guided to live out this reality by the Bodhisattva vows. When Buddha was enlightened, he saw that beings suffer samsara in the 6 realms. These realms come from, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I lost my place here. 1 second. I'm sorry, I reprinted this and apparently it left out a sentence. Okay. Anyhow, and it tells us the 6 realms, which are the hell realm, hungry ghosts, asheras, human beings, and heavenly beings. Their belief was that we transmigrated between these realms at death, related to how we lived a previous life, until we free ourselves from the karma created by greed, anger, and ignorance. Shohaku tells us that he doesn't know if these realms exist after death, but he sees them in each of us and in human society. In the hell realm, people living together make each other suffer. Each irritates the others. Seen in ourselves, this can happen when 2 or more parts of us are in conflict and argue about what to do, and we have an internal fight going on. Hungry ghosts are consumed by craving that is never satisfied. They always feel something is lacking, no matter what they obtain or consume. Animals are happy when they're fed. They feel content and will often go to sleep. He adds to this that some animals work their entire lives, like cows and elephants. He compares this to people who work their entire lives to the exclusion of everything else, to acquire either material things or to rise in the organization. There is a Japanese connection to this in particular. I don't know if you are aware, but there is actually a legal term in Japan, working someone to death. You can, if someone dies early related to their to the amount of time and energy that they worked, you can actually sue the company. So asheras, there seem to be a lot of those around right now. Asheras are fighting spirits. When they believe they are right, they criticize others based on their own concepts of justice. If necessary, they fight with others till they win. They cannot be satisfied without an enemy. They must have something against which they can struggle. Human beings seek fame, profit, and security. Our human minds are never full because we think about our future. If we don't have any problem at the moment, we aren't satisfied and worry about the future. Only human beings, he says this, although he says only human beings save something extra for tomorrow. I've been watching squirrels. I don't think that's necessarily true. So, and mice and other rodents seem to have that ability as well. So we'll take some issue with that one. The interesting one to me is heavenly beings' desires are completely met. Though they need nothing and seem happy, they aren't. Not needing to seek anything because they have everything, they struggle to find motivation to do anything. They become lazy and worry about losing their possessions. Even having it all cannot bring happiness in an absolute way, as long as our goal in life is to satisfy egocentric desires. This is what Buddha came to understand as he sat under the Bodhi tree. Suffering is caused by ignorance and the delusive desires caused by ignorance. We suffer as a result of our deeds, which cause us to transmigrate through the various realms of samsara. Our delusive desires lead to actions that cause us to suffer. When we see with eyes of Bodhi wisdom, we recognize that ignorance causes suffering. We are free of both ignorance and suffering. This is enlightenment. Shohaku tells us that being released from ignorance and suffering after his enlightenment, the Buddha continued sitting for several weeks, enjoying it. He hesitated to teach others, though, because he felt no one would understand the concept of interdependent origination, and that those who enjoy clinging take pleasure in attachment and are fond of their ties of dependence, and they will never be able to understand it. According to the Sanskrit story, a god, Brahma Sahampat, knowing what the Buddha was thinking, appears to him and says to him, "In this world, there are some people who bear only a small amount of hindrance and whose wisdom is outstanding. Please preach your dharma to them." He had to ask 3 times, but eventually the Buddha agreed. Shohaku tells us that rather than being a description of actual events, the story, in fact, may be an account of what was happening in the Buddha's mind. He goes on to say that the Buddha's hesitation to teach is understandable. It isn't hard to understand the abstract theory that ignorance and desire are the cause of suffering. We may see examples of it in other people, but when we look at it ourselves, it can be much harder to see our own suffering and ignorance. The origin of vow in Buddhism began with Buddha's determination to begin teaching. He lived by his vow for 45 years from the time of his enlightenment until his death. Buddha's vow to help people awaken to reality and save them from suffering is the first bodhisattva vow. As bodhisattvas, we are disciples or children of the Buddha. We aspire to learn the Buddha's teaching and follow his example. Vow is essential for us as Buddhist practitioners. It is a concrete and practical form of wisdom and compassion. Bodhisattva vows are general vows that should be taken by all Mahayana Buddhists. In addition, Shohaku adds, each bodhisattva makes specific vows unique to their personality and capabilities. Our direction is to live by these vows. Our sitting practice should be based on them. Let me stop again here and ask if anybody has any thoughts or questions.
So when we talk about hungry ghosts and asuras, those seem like not holdovers, but I don't know how much Dogen really spent time with that, since the focus was on the practice and shikantaza and practice realization. So I just think it's interesting that we have these early histories of Buddhist teaching that sort of function as, we call them ghosts, but like these sort of lingering after effects, or these sort of echoes that I don't really spend a lot of time thinking about hungry ghosts. I understand the concept and I appreciate what they are, but I think you I think it's with Soto Zen and with our tradition here, some of that stuff gets a little simplified or focused when we're talking about shikantaza and practice realization. I don't know if that makes sense. There seems to be like a lot of early development in Buddhism that is de-emphasized in our tradition.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I certainly am not enough of a Dogen scholar to know how much he talks about those things.
Yeah.
The one thing, as a psychiatrist, the one thing that still just kind of blows me away is how much the Buddha talked about mental health. These realms are very much human realms. And I mean, that's what Shohaku is talking about at this point. But I wonder how much of that was a way of teaching at that time. I mean, they didn't have a lot of the psychology verbiage, for instance, that we have. And so, is this I wonder how much of it that this was a way, this was a skillful means at that time,
Right.
to help people see different ways that people could get lost.
Yeah. That makes sense.
But of course, they're saying that you don't find that out. You don't go to these places till you die. So, but it's certainly looking at various kinds of human nature, I think. But I don't disagree. I don't. As we get into Yogacara and some of the later stuff, I don't hear much about. We don't hear much about these, although they still get mentioned.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I'm glad we talked about this because when I first read this, I was like, what? Because I was in Tibetan Buddhism for about 3 years, and the hungry ghosts and the hell realm and everything was discussed all the time. But I never heard about it in Zen. So I was kind of surprised it came up. So I'm glad to hear what you and Glenn both said.
Well, and it's interesting because, as we've talked about before, wherever Buddhism went, it took on whatever was around it. And in China, that was Tao and that was Confucianism. In Tibet, it was Bon or Bon. I don't actually know how to say that. It's B-O-N or B-O-H-N. And that was very much more, at least my understanding of it was that was much more of an indigenous kind of religion.
Mhm.
With all of those kinds of things, hungry ghosts and spirits. And of course, you see that if you look at the iconography from Tibet still, you see all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm not surprised that was, and that may be why we don't hear much about it in Zen. Yeah, go
And
ahead.
I think there's also the connection to Japanese folklore as well, because ghosts and monsters and
Yep.
the beasts are super prevalent in Japanese folklore. And so I'm sure, again, they're picking up these, the local language, the sort of metaphors that they needed to talk about our existence in to different realms. So that makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Yeah, just keep thinking of the Miyazaki films and the hungry ghost who in what was the Spirited Away, when the hungry ghost visits the bathhouse and is just constantly consuming and growing, and all of the sort of spirit animals and the river spirit who eventually save, so it's like all of that is suffused in the sort of folklore culture, and I can see how that was all incorporated.
There's a book on their shelf here, and I think it's called The Words of My Perfect Teacher.
Yes.
It's a Mahayana based book, and they have a whole section in there about hungry ghosts, and it's just truly amazing. But the amazing part was, I was going to a class once a week on the west side many years ago, and there was a nun, a Buddhist nun, teaching, and she was using this book, and she was absolutely convinced none of it was metaphor, it was all absolute. And these stories about the hungry ghosts were almost silly.
Yeah.
The kalpas you would spend at the bottom of the ocean was boiling copper. And if you ever made it to the top, which took kalpas, as you broke through the surface and went to gulp fresh air for the first time, somebody poured a ladle of boiling copper down your throat and bashed you in the head and killed you. And when you woke up, you were back on the bottom of the ocean. Your desire just got you right back where you came from. And there were a few more examples like that, but they were almost comical.
But that's really emphasized in Tibetan Buddhism. I read that book.
And I thought that's a great metaphor for desire. You finally get it, and you find yourself like you're still in pain, you're still not happy, it didn't get you anywhere.
Yeah.
And she goes, no, that's true, that's not a metaphor. But okay, I still understand it as a metaphor.
So you are perfectly welcome to take this literally if you so desire. I'll stick with the metaphor personally. All right. Anything else? I'm going to talk about the section on category on vow. We live based on opinions, our own and those of others. When we succeed, we feel good. When we struggle or fail, we feel bad or small. It can be bad enough that we even feel like life isn't worth living. This normal up and down in samsara is what is described as transmigrating among the six realms. The dear sister not aside from that. Human beings always feel somewhat unsatisfied, whether we are happy or sad. There is some dissatisfaction. We still feel that something is missing. We are moved by others' expectations, by the situation, or even by our self-image. Moving through samsara, we always feel a bit unsettled and unsafe and unable to find a peaceful, steady, absolute foundation for our life. Something is missing, even if we are in the heavenly realm and all of our desires are fulfilled. We are the only animals that ask who we are and how we should live. Dogen said to study Zen is to study the self. Shohaku says that he believes that a human is a being that has to study the self. For us, the self is a big question. Humans are mysterious and troublesome creatures. We feel the need to understand this mystery. This need to understand is Bodhi mind, our mind that awakens to the reality of our life. When the Buddha was enlightened, he saw the answers to these questions. What is a human being? The cause of human suffering and how to live a wholesome and peaceful life. Understanding interdependent origination means we can't live without other people and things. Studying the self then also means studying how to walk with others, pointing to the importance of Sangha. We vow to practice, even though we know that Buddha's achievement was so profound that it may be impossible for us to follow his way. Though intellectually it seems impossible from our, intellectually it seems impossible, but from our deep life force, we make the vow not from our intellect or from an emotional impulse, but from the deepest part of us. Because it is impossible to achieve what the Buddha did, we have to practice forever. There is no end and no goal. Moment by moment, one small step at a time, we move along the path. There are those times when we feel that our practice is going well and we feel happy, and others where we struggle and feel bored or in pain as we sit. Sometimes we feel enlightened, sometimes we are in hell. Living in vow, we just continue to go through it forever. Living in vow means sitting zazen, trying to help others, living and working with others. Though living in vow, we are still in samsara, and so transmigrate the 6 realms, experiencing both good times and bad. In spite of this, we can find a peaceful basis, a foundation for our life that is never moved by human sentiment. When we vow, it is not with our intellect or with a shallow emotion. We vow toward Buddha, towards something absolute and infinite. Compared to the infinite, that anything that we accomplish is insignificant. Each of us has different capabilities. If we can't do much and practice only a little, there is no reason we should feel small or say that we are sorry. We just try to be right here with this body and mind and move forward a step at a time. This is our practice. All beings live in Zen, but only humans live by Zen. Saying that all beings live in Zen means that they are living the reality of life as it is. Only human beings have to make a conscious effort to do this. Because of our doubts and delusions, we have to consciously return to reality and live on that basis. Our life should be animated and inspired by vow, not one that is watched, scolded, or consoled by vow. These verbs create separation between the person and the vow. The person and the vow are one. Our life is itself a vow. So that's what I got for today. Any more thoughts? Any comments?
I'll just make one comment, which is I'm a big fan of Shohaku's, and coming back to this book, his clarity of thought, his ability to teach these concepts is just very refreshing.
Yes.
I just, reading him, you just feel like, you're really getting back to the heart of what Zen is. And, there's lots of teachers around, but if you get a chance to meet Shohaku or read his books, he's one of the Japanese masters. And I think it comes through in his writing and his understanding. It's a very deep, profound understanding, and he has an amazing ability to communicate.
Yeah, I mean, not just the understand his ability to communicate. I mean, my finding Shohaku was huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
I totally agree with you that he is one of the best teachers that I've seen. One of the not easy reads, but clear.
Mm-hmm.
And his humility. I mean, he says that, because English is his second language, or not his first language, that he hopes that he gets the point across, because he feels clumsy and in English, which isn't, so it's like the fact that, I'm sure he had help with editing, but to be able to, express something so clearly in a second or third language.
Yeah.
Bow to him. Yeah.
I have trouble doing it in my language.
Yeah.
Somebody else's.
Right.
And I think, what is he, second or third generation? Because he worked with Kodo.
Oh,
and
well, he was transmitted to by Uchiyama.
Yeah.
Right? And Uchiyama was transmitted to by Kodo
Yeah,
Sawaki.
right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's part of the history of Zen in America, is this effort to try to translate, what was originally a very Japanese practice in both form and in culture to initially a Western lay audience.
And
It's
my
remarkable.
understanding was that when they first came over, they didn't speak very good English either.
Yeah.
And yet it still took root and has become what's here today.
And didn't, maybe I'm reading something else, but didn't Uchiyama assign Shohaku the task of, okay, you're going to learn English, and you're going to be the one who, or was it Kodo who was telling Uchiyama, your job is to learn English so that we can better communicate.
I know the story
Yeah.
you're talking about. I'm not sure who that is.
Shohaku was told by his teacher
Yeah.
to learn English and
Yeah.
go to America.
Yeah.
He didn't want to.
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
Did any of you go, what was it, 2 years ago or 3 years ago in Pennsylvania? I said, were you there?
Mhm.
Yeah, so was I.
Mm-hmm.
That was good. And he still has his limitations with the English language.
Yeah.
And he speaks so softly and quietly. Between that and his limitations, he can be, it gets your attention. You're constantly going like this. So maybe that's his way of getting you to listen.
Yeah, I was so sorry I missed that. I forget where. I was out of town at the time. I had to go someplace else. But yeah, I remember. several times I've thought of going down to Bloomington to see if I can sit with him. But if you do that, just be aware he sits 50-minute sessions.
I think he's retired now, isn't he?
Well, he retired in this. Yeah, I don't know that he doesn't. Do you know if he still teaches there though?
I think he does.
I mean, my impression was that he does, but it's
I
just
think he does.
that's an impression. I don't know that's true.
Yeah, I think he does.
But yeah, he's no longer running the place. So,
Mhm.
I believe our time is
Mhm.
of the essence. I vow to myself and to each of you to commit myself daily to the healing of our world and the welfare of all beings, to live on earth more lightly and less violently in the food, products, and energy I consume, to draw strength and guidance from the living earth, the ancestors, the future generations, and my brothers and sisters of all species, to support others in our work for the world and to ask for help when I need it, to pursue a daily practice that clarifies my mind, strengthens my heart, and supports me in observing these vows. Thank you for coming, everyone, and hopefully I'll see you Saturday.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome, Doc.